We got three very good speakers, as always, tonight. And the first one has travelled the farthest for us. Not because he's from Sweden, but he came in from Milton Keynes, is it? Where do you come from tonight?
Sholywood.
Yeah. So I think that's the longest journey. Each speaker will speak for 20 minutes, and then there'll be a half an hour combined question time after, and then we adjourn for the food and drinks for more conversation. So Peter is the first one. I will let you introduce. He's a councillor, Green Party councillor in Stockholm. So,
thank you. I'll do like that. I was thinking about using a computer, but then I realized that it's always a hassle with technology, and that's why I made a few slides like this. So I hope it's...
You're putting me to shame now. I've done nothing.
Okay, well I think this is okay, no worries. I'm gonna divide this short speak into three different areas: the New Deal, the outcome, and the conclusion. And the New Deal is actually quite a bad... some of you might be thinking of the 30s, but I will get on to what it is. We actually have some segments in the Swedish politics today that remind us of the 30s, but in a more sinister way. And I'll get on to that. About a decade ago, there was a struggle within the Green Party in Sweden. And this is nothing odd. There's a lot of struggles in any party when it reaches a certain momentum or it gains enough members. And for instance, the Social Democrats in Sweden, the Labour, they had a big one that was dubbed aptly in the papers to the War of the Rose, because they have a party symbol, a red rose. I don't know what the media called the Green Party's struggle between two groups, but the two groups that they discussed, they were the idealists and the pragmatics, or as some wicked tongues would have it, the morons and the Machiavellians. And the pragmatics actually won. And our last leader, the woman, Maria Wetterstrand, she said in a radio program that she had that you can be a far more radical in a suit. And that was the idea, that you should suit up and then you could actually sneak in your radical politics when people will take you serious. But I'm going to argue in this short speech that it wasn't a very good idea that the Green Party was to become a member of the new government that we currently have. And I think that both the idealists and the pragmatics will agree with me, at least in short term, because the election was last September. So the new government has had very little time to do anything. But what we can see is not convincing, not when it comes to green politics anyway. And let's go to the deal. The first thing. This is a deal that the former Prime Minister gave to the opposition. He said, because they knew everything pointed to it's going to be a hung parliament. We're not going to have a majority on either side. So he gave it like a gentleman's agreement. If your side, he said to the opposition, is bigger than our side, we will let you have the Prime Minister role. And he would suggest that the opposite would also agree. So if the government, the former government got a bigger majority than the opposition, they would get the Prime Minister post. And I'm going to show you what was the outcome of the... Maybe you just Google this because you're going here. I don't know if that's the case. Just going to say. And these numbers are actually the current government. So this is the outcome of the elections. And I'm going to explain them. I don't know how familiar you are with Swedish politics, but I'm going to explain them. And I've translated things so you can have your idea. If I would write all the Swedish names, you would probably Google all the time. So I've just done like this. The government is fairly simple. Then we have a party that I am calling UKIP, but it's actually called the Sweden Democrats. It's basically the same throw out 90% of all the immigrants and lock the borders, and let's move back to the 50s in some senses. They have an ideal view of Sweden. And then I label this side Tories 1 to 4, because we have 4 parties that's been ruling Sweden from 2006 up until 2014. So it's a big party, it's called Moderaterna, and that's what we would actually call the Tories. So they're the conservative with a liberal economic view, a big one. Then we have a party who's called Folkpartiet, who's kind of like the Lib Democrats. And then we have a party that's been calling this side's Green Party, it's Centerpartiet. And then we have at last the Christian Democrats, a very, very small party. So now you know the outcome, and we have 349 places in our member of parliament in Sweden. So to get a sustainable majority, you need 175 votes in parliament, or MPs. And you can see that these two sides are far from the 175 votes that are required. And the large chunk is placed in the middle with the UKIP, the Sweden Democrats. And so the New Deal was, they anticipated something like this. And this side said, we're going to let you rule if you're bigger. Now the problem is, the first problem that arrived was, are they bigger? I've written 2 numbers here, 138 and 159. 138 is the accurate number of MPs in the current government. That is the Social Democrats and the Green Party in Sweden. So we have 25 MPs from the Green Party in our parliament. The rest of them, to get to 159, the 21 added, that's the Left Party. So there you have a bit of a problem. These 3 parties were doing the campaign together, and they will constantly ask the question, are you going to be in a government position after the election? And they wouldn't really answer it straight, because you want to keep all doors open. You can just see what Ed Miliband is doing with Salmon right now, and how you don't want to commit. And the day after the election, the Green Party was happy, because they knew, okay, we're bigger. That's their conclusion. But the leader for the Left Party, Jonas Sjöstedt, he was very unhappy. Just a few days after the election, he called to a press conference, and he was furious because he's got a no from the Prime Minister. You won't get any minister posts or cabinet posts, but you can support our cause. That was the deal. So he was very upset. And this gave people a kind of a problem deciding which side had actually become the biggest. 141, and these were best of mates. I said so from the beginning, and they're still best of mates. And then you have 138 who claim to be bigger because they got the support of the last 21 who are furious because they're not in the game. But still, the Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, he carried on. And when we choose our Prime Minister, it's got nothing to do with the king in Sweden. He only has a meeting with him afterwards. It's actually a vote in Parliament, and you need no more than 174 votes against you. And then you can have 0 votes in favor, and you can still become Prime Minister. So it's a negative vote. We had a Lib Democrat in the late 70s who got, I think it was 39 yes, and the rest of them, most of them just abstained, and then he became the Prime Minister for a few months until the real election. So you can be Prime Minister with fairly little in the chamber actually liking what you're doing. Something historic happened. The Tories 1 to 4, they decided to just, okay, we'll give him the post, as we said. We won't argue. So they obtained. And UKIP, they didn't like him at all because he was with the Greens. And the Greens are like a red veil for the UKIP of Sweden. So they voted against. And 138 voted for because they were in government and they thought it was very chipful. But 21 of the lefts did something historic. In all previous Social Democrat-led governments, the left has always voted for the Prime Minister if he's a Social Democrat, because it's way better than the Tories. This time they obtained as well. So it's quite a small support in Parliament that the current Green Labour government in Sweden has right now. Okay, and then we come to the next question of the outcome. This was the first outcome where everyone said, are they going to solve it? And for a short period of time, it looked like they did. Because we had a new prime minister, we had an opposition, and we have the UKIP. Then comes the really big, important vote, and that's the vote on the budget. Because to elect a prime minister is important, but he's not really that much of a prime minister if he can't get his political and economic policies through. And this is where everything started to go wrong for the now Green Labour government that we have. In Sweden, we always have an elimination process. You know, you have to have two proposals that battle, and then one of them wins over the other and goes to another battle. So if you have several different proposals, you're going to have to start with the one with the lowest support and then work your way up. And the government is having the favor of always being in the finale, so to speak. So we had three budgets. We had the government budget, which actually then had wooed the left, so they were fairly big. And then we have the UKIP. I'm going to move them down a bit so you can see the first round of voting. And the UKIP, they were then up against the opposition. Tories 1-4. But the day before, the UKIP called to a press conference. And then they said something that you will recognize because it was in the paper yesterday about what Salmon said about Labour. We'll keep you hostage, or you're going to have to discuss with us and pour money into Scotland, and you're going to have to give us the independence vote if we're going to support you. They were even harder because they said, we're going to vote against any budget that doesn't reduce the amount of immigrants to Sweden significantly. So they said, we're not even, they made a play of it, saying that they're going to compare the two budgets. But when it came to the vote, they actually said, we're going to do this with any budget. So what happened was that the Tories got 141 votes, and the UKIP budget got 49, and these ones obtained, because that's the customary in Sweden, that if it's not your bill, you don't participate, you just put down your votes. A gentleman's agreement. So it's no written rule, but it's how it's usually done. This means that this budget moves up to the finale, and everyone knew what was going to happen. They broke the unwritten rule, and they decided to vote for this budget, which means that the government's budget didn't pass. And this was a big no-no. So we have a green, social democratic government with a Tory budget. And this is going to be the case for at least a year, because it's not until next year you can alter all of the budget and do your own. But now the established parties, these ones, have a big problem, because UKIP of Sweden have announced that they're going to do the same if things change, and it's the Tories. So unless you have 175 votes in Parliament, you're going to have to talk to them, unless you figure something out. There was one easy solution that you could try once, which actually happened a week after, because we have in Sweden the national government, of course, then we have regional governments, and then we have the local government. One of the bigger regions in Sweden, the south, Skåne, they got the same outcome as the national parliament. Not the same numbers, but the same relation between them. And in that case, when it came to the vote, can anyone guess what they did? They had these two budgets, the UKIP budget, and then they had the Tories to vote.
They abstained. Tories abstained?
No, that would be very nice of them. But it's a hard political landscape today in Sweden, which means that's 20 years ago probably this would be the case, because it was a lot more of consensus. Now it's two very big blocks fighting each other. What happened was that these ones didn't obtain. So they voted for the UKIP budget. which sounds horrific if you're a Green Labour. But this actually means that the budget that went to the finale was the UKIP budget, and they got their own budget for next vote, and that means that the Tories couldn't. How much they despise this one, they can't vote for the UKIP budget. So they had to abstain, so they have been kidnapped by the situation. But as you see, you can only try this once, because this is fairly easy to see. So people started writing columns in the papers, how is this going to work? Are the Tories going to vote for the government's budget to get them to the finale, and the government is voting for UKIP, or how is it going to play out? If people don't vote for what they want, because they vote for what they think they want in the finale, it can go terribly wrong. So people were, and this didn't do anything good for people's views on politics either, of course, because people just saw people shambling and trying to get their votes through by all means. So the Machiavellians, who really had a field day, and the idealists, they were just turning in their graves or wherever they were. So the Prime Minister did something historic again, so it's been a really historic year in Sweden if you like politics. If you don't, you won't know what the fuss is about, but if you do, every day you open the paper, it's a new story. The Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, he called for an extra election. And this might not sound that bad to you, or something to write home about, because you're fairly used to them, I guess, because the Prime Minister can call an election in a bit of a range. That's the normal thing. In Sweden, the last time this happened was 1958. So you see, it's something that's almost unprecedented. 1958 was the last time. And this was Stefan Löfven's way of telling the people, the opposition, that we're all hijacked because of this behavior that violates the gentleman agreement, the unwritten rule, and makes actually impossible to govern and rule. And these parties had to put on a brave face and say, oh, we don't mind. A little bit of an extra election never hurt anybody, we think. But three of the parties are really small and close to the 4% barrier that you have to reach to get into parliament. So you could feel that they're going to make some kind of agreement. And if this agreement is good or not, you're going to have to decide by yourself. But the agreement was that the Tories, for next budget, we have 3 more budgets in this term that this government is trying to pass. They said, we're going to put forward our own budget, but we're not going to vote for it. So it's just going to be like, this is what we want, but we won't vote. UKIP, of course, of Sweden thought it was terrible, because they get some kind of point of saying, why do we elect politicians that have the power to make their policies come true, and then in the heat of the moment they abstain from doing so, because they should be thrilled. It's their economic plan right now. But still, it was a pleasure with some kind of dark shadow, because they knew that they could govern with the Social Democrat budget. So here you can see the outcome, and this agreement is called the December Agreement. And it's in abbreviation, it means death, which is suitable as well, because some people said that this death agreement is the death to policies and death to politics and people's trust in politics. So I would say that Sweden is in a fairly difficult place right now. We're going to have a social democratic and a green budget next year, if nothing strange happens with this agreement. But people who are tending to vote for this party are actually feeling that they have immense influence over policies in Sweden. And some new polls are actually showing that they're going up. They got 12.9% in the election, and some polls are showing 15% now. So you can see that if this group grows, it's the 3rd biggest party right now, 3rd biggest. It's going to be harder and harder to just say they won't have anything to say about Swedish politics. Okay. Why do I say that I think it was better, it would have been better if the Green Party wasn't part of the government? Basically, it's because the Green Party made a worse election 2014 than the previous one. We dropped a bit. We got the precise same amount of MPs, but we dropped a bit in the election. We had a really good election to the European Parliament. There was no question about that, but it didn't transfer to the national or general election. So I don't think it's a good idea, that's the first point, to go into a government with lower support than you assume that you would have. That might be okay, but you wouldn't want to do it, that's my second point, in one of the weakest governments that Sweden has had. That's not a good way of starting your idea, I'm going to be a minister. We have 6 ministers right now of 24 in the cabinet. 6 of them are from the Green Party. And what, let's say 5.5, some wicked chunk says, because the Minister of Democracy and Culture, she was actually not a member of the Green Party until a week before she got the job. So she got the job and then she signed up for the Green Party, and then the Green Party had another minister, but that's more of a show minister, some people say. And number 3, why was it bad? Because the Green Party is jeopardizing its future of a better election next time, because some of the most important issues in the campaign, I'm going to mention the 3 most important questions and the 4th that is coming up. In most of them, the Green Party looks like the loser in media and the press, which makes some of the voters might thinking about turning to the Left Party, because the Left Party in these questions have the same issue, the same opinion as the Green Party, and they don't have to struggle with the responsibility of doing against their own will. The first question is the question about a big highway outside of Stockholm called Förbifarten. The Green Party and the Left Party has been against this for years, and all the congestion prices, money, up until I think it's 2040s, are devoted to this big highway, which is not what people signed up for when they wanted congestion pricing. They wanted the money, most of it, to go to public transport, and now it's going to a big highway. So the Green Party is actually having to defend this decision. The Left Party can stand there and say, we didn't vote for this, we don't want it. The next question is about the guns and arms sales to Saudi Arabia, which I know the Guardian, amongst other, the Washington Times, I think, has written about. And that is actually a question where the Green Party comes out in favor, but that's mostly because the Social Democrats in Sweden, they were divided. So if the Social Democrats weren't divided, it was a big part of the Social Democrats that also wanted to stop this agreement. I don't think that the Green Party would have their say in this. So it's a half of a victory for the Green Party. Then we have a big airport, not the big one in Stockholm, but a small one, that the Green Party and the Left Party want to close in 15 years and build housing, because it's, of course, like in London, house prices are skyrocketing and people don't have anywhere to live, and they say this is a very perfect area, it's central, it's huge, we can build like a new vibrant borough here. And we have 20 minutes by train to the big airport, so it shouldn't be, given the congestions, it shouldn't be that of a big problem. So, and this won't happen either, because the Social Democrats don't really want it. They want to keep the airport. So this is 3 questions, and 2 of them has come out bad for the Green Party, and one of them is half a victory. And the 4th one that's coming up is the coal plants in Germany that is owned by the totally government-owned company Vattenfall in Sweden. And here the Left Party and the Green Party wants to close all the mines and don't open the new ones that they have the right to. But of course the Social Democrats are more inclined to selling it, which would give a lot of money, but of course wouldn't do anything for the environment because someone else would just pick up the coal. And this looks like a new big issue for the government, and probably if the Green Party were to stand outside, they would have a better chance of actually influencing the Social Democrats. Why do I say this? 2 of the negotiators in the former, if you go back to 1998, when the Green Party didn't belong to the government but was associated with it, the negotiators said that the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister of the Labour Party, he was terrified because since they didn't have any cabinet posts, they could any day just rise up and say, we won't agree to this, and leave the room. So you had a very strong point of argument, and you didn't have the responsibility. So some people argue that we actually got more green politics with the Greens out of government because the Social Democrat had to negotiate with both the lefts and the Greens. And in those cases, when they were on the same page, it was very hard. Now, in effect, the left sees the Greens as a part of the Social Democrat, as the government. So we don't have as strong leverage. And with this, I would like to thank you.